has a kind of unique culture there which draws on Afro-Caribbean heritage and Voodoo heritage. And there's lots of places there that reflect this energy. One place she mentions is House of Hoodoo, which is a kind of apothecary shop run by a voodoo priestess called Jessica Winston. And it provides this authentic lens into the practices of voodoo. That kind of whimsical, magical feel runs through it.
That's Jo McGinn, editor of WGSN's City by City Guides. And she joins this episode of the WGSN Create Tomorrow podcast to discuss the cities to watch for 2023. Stay tuned to find out where this magical place is and why it's on our radar as a creative hotspot for this year. I'm Bethan Ryder, Executive Editorial Director at WGSN, and as we roll into 2023, we decided to discuss one of our most popular reports with the team that put it together. Jo McGinn, together with Charlotte Chan and Ray Sabray. The cities we highlight are always creative hubs, but they also tend to reflect some of the bigger consumer trends we're seeing around the globe. And so this year's choices are perhaps less obvious than usual and truly testament to the rise of the digital nomad, those people who've relocated out of big cities following the pandemic or have simply chosen to work remotely in livable, less hectic cities. I kicked off by asking Jo to explain her criteria for cities to watch, and if first and foremost it's mainly about the latest cool shops.
So that's our focus, because obviously most people that are reading our guides, there are subscribers who work in the creative industries. Many of them are planning their trips for research and inspiration, and they really want to know what are the best shops, where can they research new upcoming brands and exciting local brands, where can they go to markets, maybe to research artisan crafts and those kind of traditional goods. We also try and focus on culture a lot as well. So we'll be looking at, which galleries are promoting contemporary artists in the city, or are there exciting, new places for culture that are kind of opening up. We'll look at restaurants, we look at food and drink, and we also look at technology. But a big factor as well is sustainability. So which cities are, really future-proofing their urban design and planning, or which cities are kind of putting nature first.
It is a great vertical that we have on the site, because I know that every client gets it. If you sort of buy food and drink or you buy fashion, you get city by city. And I think obviously we're incredibly global now. We've got like 120 people in content and offices around the world. So I'd imagine that's quite helpful in the process, Jo. What's the process like trying to pinpoint those really great cities? Because how many are there that you've got on the list?
We have 6 in total. We cover all the regions of the world. So we try and kind of evenly balance it across APAC, EMEA and Americas. And yes, like you said, it's a process of using all our on-the-ground researchers. We have contributors from all over the world, and they are, throughout the year, really, they're feeding in, insights from their region and suggesting what's exciting right now. And then towards the end of the year, we start to kind of consolidate that and think, right, which are the cities that we really think are emerging for 2023.
So let's dive into, I think we'll just give a teaser for listeners of 3 of the cities that are on the list for next year. Now, I'm really interested about this city because that's on the list. I know that Korea has become a real sort of, its soft power has really been punching above its weight in terms of TV, film, music. It's become huge. So there's a city called Jeju. I hope I've said that correctly. Charlotte Chan, I know that you've put this city forward and written about this. What's so remarkable about this city?
I'm lucky and love to go Jeju recently, and it is actually having a very different vibe from the major Korean peninsula. It is a more laid-back island. It is actually one of the largest islands in South Korea, and it is like one of the most popular domestic travel location for all like local Koreans and international travelers alike. And I think what is interesting about Jeju is it is actually one of the busiest airline route during the pandemic, like globally. the flight from Seoul to Jeju is one of the busiest. And when I go there, you can feel that the vibe there is really different from like the busy Korean, like Seoul, like Busan, it's very different. And it is more aligned with what we've mentioned inside about conscious travel. It is very like focused on like the local produce. I have visited Innisfree Jeju House, which is like the Korean brand that is focusing using the natural ingredients like the tangerine, like the green tea, which is locally famous in Jeju, which is this kind of vibe that makes me think Jeju worth being one of the cities to watch in Asia especially.
And in terms of Koreans, what sort of demographic? Is it very popular amongst Gen Z, or is it incredibly broad?
It is interestingly broad. I thought it would be like a holiday destination for young people but then it's not. When I go there, I see actually different age group, from like student, they go as a school trip destination or like dating destination for couples, and even for like older people, because there are like I think over 30 golf clubs in there. So this is also a destination for older age group that will choose that as a golf like holiday destination. One thing is very interesting is when I visit those like really cute cafes, you can also see like elderly people go there and in line queuing for those like very hipster kind of cafes and spots.
And do you think, you said it was incredibly busy in lockdown, so has it become very much the place for Koreans who are digital nomads to go and work because it's like a resort island? Are people kind of going there for a month and working from there? Is that the kind of behaviour you're seeing?
Interestingly, before I go, I did saw some articles saying it is actually people live there want to move away from the island because they can't find, like they don't have enough living income to stay in the island alone. But then when we have like remote working comes into places, I expect this would become like an emerging trend again.
You're listening to the WGSN Create Tomorrow podcast, and in this episode we're revealing some of our cities to watch for 2023. If you're a designer or creative, these are the cities you need to put on your travel list. Next, we hear from Raisa Bray, a researcher in our research hub who's based in Cape Town. So what's her city for 2023?
I chose Addis Ababa just because I feel as though Africa has been kind of, the point of entry has been a bit difficult, whether you're traveling from fellow African nations to get around or whether from Europe or any of the other continents. It was quite difficult before, but Ethiopia's actual national carrier has made it so much easier for travelers from everywhere to have a premium experience, to use Addis Ababa as a hub when traveling to different countries. And speaking about with cost of living and people trying to make the most of a holiday, is also a great stopover destination for a few days to add onto a trip. When it comes to traveling within Addis, I think it's so amazing to see such an untouched country when it comes to its natural beauty. It's like perched on the Great Rift Valley, and they have so much to offer when it comes to food, which is so unique to the region. Addis Ababa offers, and Ethiopia as a whole, offers so many great vegan options when it comes to, that's just how they are. The Ethiopian Orthodox Christianity of faith, they are naturally vegan. So the food just revolves around their faith, which is also aligning with the food, like the global food trends, which makes it easier for people with dietary requirements to travel there, as well as just food research. I find that they use a grain called teff, which is naturally gluten-free in their injera bread, which is also extremely nutritious. But when it comes to what Ethiopia offers, as well as in other neighboring African countries, is extreme attention to detail for handcraft and just like weaving. So there's a lot of textile inspiration that can be found there. So beyond food and drink, I feel as though fashion, interiors can take a lot away from the local craft, from markets as well as boutique stores.
Did you have any other cities that almost made it that you think might creep into 2024?
Firstly, I want to mention that the shiniest cities like Lagos or Cape Town, I feel as though they've already reached peak popularity, and that's why I feel as though Addis shines. But Nairobi, we've spoken about before, is buzzing when it comes to just tech startups, a huge international cohort of people, so it's quite a melting pot, as well as mixing the local heritage with new influences from people who have immigrated there. Cairo, I'd say, is definitely one to watch, especially just Egypt as a whole when it comes to infrastructure that's being built there, just new preservations of the existing rich history. Next year, there's an amazing museum opening that will preserve all the artifacts. I'd say keep an eye out for Kigali and Rwanda, just for the sustainability focus from the government. People from Rwanda, they act very sustainably, and how just being conscious of those around you to leave the place as if how you would find it. That is the mentality in Kigali and Rwanda as a whole.
Agreed with Kigali. I think it is being featured in one of our rising city guides before as well. Its sustainability policies, it's really doing great and pushing it to the forefront.
I'm Bethan Ryder, and this is the WGSN Create Tomorrow podcast. We're giving you a taster of our cities to watch for 2023. Listen in now to Jo McGinn, who you've heard in the intro as she reveals her top magical, whimsical pick for 2023. Now, Jo, you are the editor of City by City. What is the other city on your list of 6 next year that's really piquing your interest? Because you've been doing this for 10 years. So what's the one that you're excited about?
The city I'm really excited about is New Orleans, actually. This was picked out by our US contributor, Megan Preves. And I'm really excited about it because it feels so different. And what she's called it is this kind of magic-infused energy there. And we're talking a lot about escapist experiences at WGSN, where people are kind of looking for an escape from the ordinary after the pandemic. We've been sort of cooped up behind our screens, and we're wanting something that feels completely different from our everyday life. And I think New Orleans hits that spot. It has a kind of unique culture there, which draws on Afro-Caribbean heritage and Voodoo heritage. And there's lots of places there that reflect this energy. One place she mentions is House of Hoodoo, which is a kind of apothecary shop run by a voodoo priestess called Jessica Winston. And it provides this authentic lens into the practices of voodoo. So you can find conjuring candles and ritual baths, and you can even book a spiritual consultation there. And then there's also a similar sort of feel within the food and drink scene in the city. So it's that kind of whimsical, magical feel runs through it. There's a restaurant that she talks about called N7, which is hidden behind a garden, behind a gate, and it feels like super romantic and rustic. There's jazz playing, it serves natural wines and really colourful dishes.
It's interesting that a couple of the cities that we're talking about here, obviously Rwanda had the awful genocide, New Orleans had the awful floods. It's really great to see the rebirth of these cities and to see them sort of flourishing, if you like, after really, really, really tough times. Is that something that you, over the years of doing this report, Jo, that you think is a pattern that happens, that cities regenerate in this way when they've been hit by something like this?
Yeah, I think definitely they sort of come out fighting even stronger. Often you find a kind of collective spirit happens in those cities where communities might come together again. Certainly, like we mentioned about Kigali, that's definitely had that sort of renewed energy of collaboration and cooperation that's come back into the fore there. And in New Orleans, for example, they're really putting in big efforts to kind of keep the city from experiencing another natural disaster. So there's projects that they're funding where very sustainable projects such as harvesting oyster beds to kind of strengthen the barriers within the sea. So there's things like that New Orleans is doing, and these other cities that have faced difficulties in the past, they're trying to make themselves more sustainable for the future.
It's like after the lockdown, things, we're all coming back. It's interesting that even those cities like London, Paris, New York, that are kind of very well established cities, are still kind of finding their feet a little bit after what we've all been through.
Yeah, again, after the pandemic, those bigger cities are struggling still, because some people have chosen to live, one of our cities is Turin in Italy, and that's sort of taking over, almost attracting people that used to be tied to Milan. And now they're looking maybe at Turin. You can commute to Milan in 45 minutes, but you can still work from home if you need to. And you've got nature, you've got a greener city, it's cheaper. It's a more livable city. You've got the Alps there, you can go skiing. Those like smaller cities maybe are becoming kind of rivals to the more established players.
I always find it really interesting that there's always sort of an issue in the UK in that there's a lack of investment in cities outside of London. And I know that in other countries, in other European countries, often there are plenty of cities that seem to be booming. So I'm hoping that in the UK we'll see more investment, Joe, and more cities like that aren't London kind of really come into the fore. Do you think that's the case? Are you seeing that a little bit?
Definitely. And actually, cities to watch this year for 2022, we featured Manchester in the UK, the north of the UK, because that is precisely that. It has had investment. There's big media companies have moved there, and there's a lot of exciting development happening there. So I think that is a good example of a city in the UK that is rising, and definitely is one to visit if you're looking for inspiration that's not what you get in London.
It's funny, isn't it? Because when in the 90s, when Manchester was very much on the map, it's interesting how these things kind of are cyclical as well. It's Create Tomorrow, the WGSN podcast. So now you've heard about 3 of our cities to watch for 2023, let's find out which city we also recommend for its exciting creative energy. If you are a designer in the fashion industry, of all the cities for next year, where would you really encourage our clients to look for inspiration, Joe?
I'd say Hanoi in Vietnam. I think the whole region is really exciting if you want to go and research creative energy and inspiration. It's a region that we've been watching for some time, and I think Hanoi stands out in particular at the moment. It's a city that successfully blends old and new. And so you have the traditional crafts, but you also have this really exciting growing contemporary design scene, which people can go and research if they go there. But also you can do a lot of this research online. Our reports have lots of links, so you can explore brands and these places are so digitally connected now that you can explore a lot of these concepts online as well. But if you do get to go there, I definitely recommend checking out some of the local fashion labels. There's one called Kilomet 109, which is a sustainable slow fashion clothing brand. And it collaborates with local artisans, and they even grow, they spin, they weave, they print and dye the fabrics. And then they're all hand stitched in its studio there. And then there's lots of culture spaces in Hanoi to explore, and lots of them have that collaborative feel to them. So there's one called Tadioto, I think I've pronounced that right, which is a gallery, a cafe, but also it's kind of become its own creative commune where artists and writers, musicians gather for creating exhibitions and creating events. So I think if you want that injection of new creativity and exciting creativity, Hanoi's a city to put on your list.
I know we're not going to dive, sort of explore them in depth, but where in the LATAM region are we thinking is a place to watch?
We've got Quito in Ecuador, the capital of Ecuador. That's our city to watch in LATAM. So we're really excited about Quito. Again, one reason is that it's developing a real scene for local brands and retailers who have developed their own aesthetic and their own identity. So they're not looking, they're not looking elsewhere. They're not looking to North America. They're creating their own identity, which I think is really exciting. It's definitely a place that is bolstered by a kind of steady, stable financial situation as well there. It has the US dollar, so it's not so dependent on kind of rising inflation that you can see in other parts of Latin America or South America.
Raisa, you mentioned a new museum in Cairo, but if we were going to pick cultural highlights for 2023, like a new museum or maybe a new kind of highline type place like New York has, like an incredible outdoor space or something like this, have you all got a kind of cultural highlight next year that you're really looking forward to?
I actually have an answer. It's so funny that you mentioned the High Line, because when we were doing the research, I looked at Turin as well, and they have a former Fiat factory, which on the rooftop they had a secret test track, so they used to test the cars on it, and it's called La Pista 500. But now the test track has kind of been added into a sculpture garden with plants. It's kind of like the High Line but kind of smaller, and that is literally, I have a whole Instagram save folder for it, and I would love to go there next year.
Fantastic. Charlotte, have you got one that you're looking forward to?
I cannot decide because I'm working on the cultural guide right now, but then there's one art fair, like a new art fair in Tokyo, Gendai Tokyo Art Fair. I think this is one contemporary art, like focus art fair that I think we should really like look at. I think it's aimed to be one of the largest in Asia about contemporary, but who knows, like let's see. And definitely look forward to our culture guide.
I just wanted to add a little shout out for my hometown of Cape Town. In February they have the Cape Town Art Fair, and it's quite an incredible collection of a lot of African galleries that come to Cape Town at our convention center, as well as further international collectors and galleries that showcase, and it's quite a spectacle. So if anybody is visiting during tourist season, because summer lasts until about May here, it's definitely one to watch as well, I'd say.
I'm a big fan of Ardmore Racer. When I travelled in Cape Town, I bought some. So there's probably even more ceramic brands that I could discover beyond the lovely Ardmore, which is brilliant. Jo, what about you? What's your cultural highlight next year?
Well, I'm looking forward to actually lots of events happening in London. David Hockney is launching this amazing looking new immersive art show at the Light Room in King's Cross, which is this new kind of venue for huge multi-sensorial experiences with lots of digital projection and audio. So I'm really excited to go and see that. Also in London, Battersea Power Station has just reopened, and it's really exciting in terms of retail and what's going on there as a kind of new London destination to visit. So I'm going to be going there and checking that out as well.
Hopefully this episode will keep you busy planning your next trip, whether for business or pleasure. Thank you to Jo, Charlotte and Raisa, and thank you for listening. If you're a WGSN subscriber, you'll find many city guides on the City by City section of the site. If you want to find out how to subscribe, head over to WGSN.com to discover how you can get access to our service. We're constantly publishing new content focusing on how we can design a brighter, better future for our industries. These now include food and drink, interiors, beauty, fashion and consumer tech. You can subscribe to the show on all major podcast platforms, and if you like what you've heard, why not leave us a rating and review on iTunes. I'd like to thank our podcast producer, Roland Bodnam, and future episodes will include colour trends for 2023 and also our highlights from CES. If you're a subscriber, you can find reports on both these things already live on the site. Until next time.